come up to the podium and I find my name tag already on the floor. So welcome to the second day of our conference on Versailles 1919 to 2019, the Paris Peace Conference at 100. I know one of the things that listening to the presentations and having a lot of conversations about that time period tends to bring up a lot of things I hadn't really thought about for a long period of time, and probably true for all of us, that we start thinking about personal connections that we have to that time period that we really hadn't thought about for a long period of time. And I realized when I was thinking about it that both my parents were born in the spring of 1919, at that very time that the Versailles Peace Conference was on. And I also started thinking about my great uncle Clarence, who served in the U.S. Cavalry during World War I, and though he never talked about his experience in the war, did used to show me his pictures parading down the streets of Paris. I suppose that was my first vision of what a great place Paris would be to come and visit. And when I actually went off and started doing my PhD research in a remote mountain area of Nepal, deep into the Himalayas, I was working with a group of people who would regularly send men off to serve in the British Army and the Indian Army. And as they told me about their many years of experience, one of the stories that constantly came out were about their relatives who had served in World War I. And there are, in fact, hundreds of thousands of Nepalese soldiers who served during World War I. First soldiers to go in at Gallipoli and the last ones out. So there's lots of different ways in which we have many different kinds of connections that we hadn't really thought of. And it was really provocative for me to think about this over the last day or so. I do think that the first day, and I'm sure you agree with me about this, provided many intellectually provocative and even intellectually delicious moments. And that I thought the first day's presentation did an excellent job drawing attention to the complexities of this period, to the nuances, to the relevant details of global political relationships both prior to and after the war. And I thought they were really excellent at discussing and highlighting for us how aspects of the way we are now and the way global politics has evolved, including aspects of nationalism, empire, imperialism, intellectual imaginaries, transnationalism, and political precarities, and the ways in which these things are rooted in the way the world was both before and after the Great War. Yesterday's presentations alternated, I thought, between big picture, sweeping traverses over a broad landscape, and at times deep dives into some very specific stories and specific regions, providing both a broad picture of global political aims without oversimplifying or overgeneralizing, as well as pertinent details of many aspects of global politics, including many that are not usually covered in a discussion of the consequences of the war and the consequences of the Versailles Peace Conference. Adam Tooze particularly masterfully laid out for us many of the key questions that emerge from a radical agenda of the conference and directed our attention to the way in which the conference design brilliantly captures crucial shifts in the way historians and political scientists now think about the impact of 1919, including our attention to parts of the world, China and the Middle East particularly, though not Nepalese soldiers, that have not always been included in the analysis of the impact of Versailles Treaty. I don't think the conference is fully comprehensive in looking at all the issues, all the regions of the world, but it invites us, and it even requires us to open up our visions and to our understanding and to take on new perspectives about how we think about these kinds of things. The presentations from yesterday included many intellectually provocative morsels that stimulated our thinking and encourage us to embrace these new perspectives, and I think give us ideas on which we will be chewing for quite some time. They help to decenter, as Steve Sawyer pointed out to us yesterday, the 1919 moment, redirecting us to the peace treaty that never was in 1960, or talking about conflicts that never really ended, as we've talked about in the Middle East. They help to recenter what has heretofore been treated as sideshows in this kind of discussion, And they helped to refocus us on the global impact of the war, the very global impact of the war and its aftermath. And they helped to pull the veils back from many parts of the story and the narrative that had been shrouded in secrecy, including the secret peace negotiations or conflicts that had been shrouded in secrecy as well. They led us to think about the aspirational imaginings of a new world order and the even more complicated challenges of working out aspects of that imagination of peace and an imagined new world order. And they led us, I think, to wonder, since we have the benefit of 100 years of hindsight, but it led us to wonder about the degree to which the actors in 1919 really understood at all the enormously widespread and influential implications of what they were doing and what they were imagining at that time. The keynotes and the presentations yesterday certainly have set a very, very high standard, but it is a standard that I am confident that today's presenters will strive to reach and probably exceed. And so it is with great anticipation and delight that we begin the second day of our conference. Welcome.